All right, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started on chapter 3. And one thing that I want to get a little bit more into detail is working with Chrome and debugging with Chrome. So we'll talk about that when we go get to go and play a little bit on getting chapter 3-1 working for you to get started on your homework. So let's go ahead and make a run through the PowerPoints. Some of the PowerPoint, a lot of the stuff, some of the stuff that you're going to see in here, you've already learned about with your first programming language. So I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on everything, but what we're going to look at is how arrays are done, and then working with HTML elements by their particular types, and of course HTML collections. We won't get into the while, do while, and for loops. That's something that you guys pretty well should be able to handle from from your initial course. What you end up having with an array is a contiguous set of memory, or memory and RAM. And when I say by contiguous is when RAM or when an array is put in memory, it's done in blocks of memory that are kind of together. So when you kind of visualize an array, you want to think of it in that manner, because it makes it easy to kind of understand how they work, because they're very specific in organization. And that's a traditional array. So a traditional array versus a keyed array, you will have what we call a pointer, but you don't need to worry about pointers in JavaScript. That's not something that you actually see. So when you think about array, it's going to be a value that stores like the address, and that's how an array is done in memory, is that there's a value, the array name. So if we create an array called array, that part is a pointer that's going to say point to or store the address of that first, or that block of continuous memory that's together. So if it, like, let's say that we had an array of 3. By the way, I'm rubbish at drawing squares today. So if we were to store 3 numbers in memory in RAM, let's say that we stored the value 1, 2, and 3. And those are integers, so this one would start at address 3000, and it would go until address 3003, and that's where that value 1 is held in binary. And then this one would be 4 bytes up, 3004 and 3008. And that's how it's kept in track, or how arrays are kept track of with contiguous memory blocks. And the pointer itself holds the position in RAM, the numerical position in RAM of where that is, and that's all implicit. You don't have to worry about pointers, but just be aware that that's kind of what's going on. So you can instantiate an array using the new operator, or you can just straight up hard code the array in. And there's different ways of working with the array, but mostly we work with it with a subscript operator. And one thing that you want to know with arrays is you always have an element. Your first element is not the first element, it's the 0th element. This is the first element, the second one in, and then this is the second one element, or the third element, which is the value 2 for a subscript. Because in programming and even in mathematics, and when you're actually applying mathematics to the real world, most of mathematics, they imply the number 0 is there. So that means you're really not taught to look at it. But if you're actually really trying to get it to work in real life, no, 0 is actually 1, and 1 is 2. It's kind of funny that way. But yeah, it's the first one is not 1 in programming. It's 0. Kind of think of it as the starting position of a memory location. Okay. Here's an example of creating an array using static or just hard coding, and literally just putting the values you want in the array in, instead of adding them through or other ways of adding to your array dynamically. And then you have all kinds of other examples here that you can work with. One thing that you will find is that arrays are difficult to work with when you're dealing with your own object types. And we don't really learn a lot about JavaScript object-oriented programming here with this particular book, and essentially we don't really want to go into that at this point when we're learning to work with JavaScript and HTML, because JavaScript objects are not always used to change HTML after the fact. It's more of a something that you would need for other than dynamically modifying HTML. So you have your multi-dimensional arrays in a matrix with a coordinate system, and this is all C-based language. Everything that you're learning about JavaScript as a language, and let's say you took Python before this course and now you're learning JavaScript. Well, you learned about loops in Python, but JavaScript, because it's a C-based language, you're also kind of learning C and C++, which is, essentially, if I tell anybody who wants to learn how to program, how they can learn it the fastest, I just say you just learn a C-based language. That's it. Once you know that, it doesn't matter what language you have. So when we look at the array coordinate system, a lot of the stuff we see in this library is pretty much the same. The only thing that's different about JavaScript and other languages is it's particularly designed to grab a hold of elements and change them after the fact, and the browser works with them to re-render that dynamic change. So we got HTML collections. The DOM, the document object model, is what JavaScript really does a good job on being able to grab specific elements. And an element could be just a box on your screen, or it could be a text box, or it could just be something drawn on the screen. It could be an image. It could be anything on the screen. And what you can do then is whatever element that you can grab a hold of, whatever it represents, is it an image? Is it a text box in a form, or is it an image or is it a link? All those things are going to be in the DOM to be able to load into JavaScript to change your HTML dynamically. Okay, so you've got some basically the ability to grab a collection of items from a particular page, and that's one we're going to be playing with today. We're going to be playing with the get elements by class name, I believe. And what this allows you to do is get a whole array of elements off the website, or off of the HTML or off your page, and then modify those particular ones. And we're going to be doing it with 3-1 and checkboxes today. And I think we're going to be using the class name, definitely. So we're going to use that to get an array of checkboxes, and then we're going to use that array of checkboxes to add. We want to add events to those elements, and to add an event to an element using JavaScript, first you have to get the element from the document object model, the DOM, and you do that by these functions: get element by class name, get elements by tag name, get elements by name. You got get element by ID, and these will be able to will give you the ability to assign a variable to that particular element in your HTML page, and modify it. Okay, so another thing that we have is the console that you can use. I think we're gonna go ahead and let's get into let's go play, because that's the main thing of what we want to do, is be able to grab an array of elements from the page and then change them. You guys know loops. I'm not gonna put time into loops. You should know loops. Array methods for generating loops. That I want to talk about. So there are different ways of traversing through a loop. You can use a for statement, or traversing through an array. You can use a for statement and walk through the array for the length of how many items are in the array, or you can use the for each statement. Now, just so you know, if you're using JavaScript to build a game, you never want to use the for each statement, because the for each statement is incredibly inefficient. So you would use a for loop with the length argument for your array to walk through and print it. And we may end up doing that. But here's an example of the for each. For each item or array in X. Now it's interesting how this language calls the for each. It's actually as a member of the array. So, you know, you don't need to use the for each. You can actually do this with just a simple for loop and then use x.length inside of it to press, or to traverse the array. Now, that's going to be the main thing that you're going to want to do, is create arrays from elements on your screen and traverse through them and modify them in some way. And in our case, for what we're going to be playing with today, we're going to add an event handler for every one that we, for checkboxes that we need to allow the user to choose for and have a calculation based on what was checked. Okay, so you can add events to your array elements. Once you get the elements in the array, you can go through a for each or a for loop, and right there you can say, adding the particular event to the ARR array of I. We're going to look into that soon. And then we've got some other array tools that you can use here that will help you as you progress through, possibly. Instead of having to build it, check to see if it's already been built. This one right here in particular is find and find index. So the find, if you want to see if something's in the array, you can use the find. But mostly what you want to do is you don't want to find, you want to find what's in the array, but you also need to know where it's at in the array and what index item it's at. And that's where that find index helps you out with. All right. I think we're good. You guys know how to make decisions. You should know if statements. Let's go play. We're going to start on 3-1 today, and we're going to probably get through it, and then I want to get into debugging of 3-1. And then we'll set you loose on the rest of your assignments. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up NetBeans. Visual Studio is a good one. I'm probably may end up doing Visual Studio sometime here. Visual Studio Code is kind of cool. But NetBeans is kind of the go-to for me. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and create another application, another project. Okay, so I'm going to say new project. I want an HTML5 application, and I'm going to put it on the desktop so that I'm not burying it. Okay, and let's give it a good, let's say chapter 3. Let's just say chapter 3. That's good enough. Chapter 3. And next. get that going, and finish. Okay, I'm going to take this step by step, but I'm going to cheat a little bit because I got the code written off over the side, but I'm not going to do the code all at once. I want to take it in with you step by step, and kind of talk about it and then do some debugging on it. First, let me zoom in on this thing so you guys aren't going blinded by looking there. There we go. That's probably going to be a little bit better for you. Okay, let's look at the code that we need for chapter 3. So I'm going to go ahead to the data files that I have available for you. And let's see what we got here. Okay. Looks like chapter 3, project 1. That's what we're going to be getting after. We're trying to get 3-1 working. And this is our starting code that we're going to get, that we're going to use. Pretty much it just contains the HTML. And we need to write the JavaScript to dynamically change the HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it in here. I copied it from the other folder, and I'm just going to hit Control V to paste it. It looks like it's not liking me today. Oh, maybe I didn't paste it well. Copy it. Control V. Nope. Well, it's actually not very good to do all your file manipulation stuff in here. You want to do that on the desktop. I've actually blown a whole year-long project in NetBeans from doing things in the editor too much. You know, if you're doing file directory stuff, do it in your directory. So this is going to be desktop, is where I put that. Chapter 3, public HTML, and there is my indexed HTML. I'm just going to get rid of that, and then it'll disappear from NetBeans. Because NetBeans is not too stupid. It actually is fairly smart. Well, you see it pop right up on the NetBeans? That's why I like NetBeans. It's just stuff like that, you know? It's just like crazy awesome. Not every software thing can handle that. Okay, so we just had to put it in the folder and it adds it right to the project for us. That's just awesome. Yeah. Usually in other languages you would have to add it to the project, but not JavaScript. JavaScript you don't need to. Okay, so let's look at the HTML. Now, if you look at and we actually run this HTML, we're going to see what we need to actually get an array of. We need to get an array of checkbox items. So I'm going to want to do this in several ways to verify that I'm actually writing code that's working as I progress. The stupidest thing you can do is write all your code and then try to get it to work. Let me repeat that. The stupidest thing that you can do is to write all your code and then try to get it to work. I hope I don't have to go 3 times. I liked students to, while they're learning, you try to get a little piece working, then you move on. Try to get a little piece working and verify that it's working with the debugger, and then move on. So the main thing that we need for this is essentially something to modify. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to rename this index because I don't want to type that much stupid stuff in the, let's see, there we go, index. Index, good. And when I hit play, it should run. And it did. Okay, I hit play now, and NetBeans connector is trying to hook up. I think I need to reinstall it because it's kind of, but that's okay because you don't really want to debug in NetBeans anyways. You want to probably most likely be debugging in Chrome, and that's what we'll be doing today. So once I hit play, it popped up on my web browser. So what we want is we want to grab from the DOM, the document object model, all these elements, all these checkbox elements. And we want to grab those checkbox elements and we want to change them. Well, the way that we're going to change them is just by adding an event trigger so that fires when the user selects it and adds to the total cost. So the first thing that we need to do is actually getting it to connect and get the information out of those elements. And so what we're going to use is we're going to use a line of code that is going to grab those elements for us as an array and return it as an array, and then we're going to be able to work with these elements as an array. And each element in the array we need to add that event trigger to, and that's going to be on the JavaScript code. So when we look at the JavaScript code, the only thing it has for us is the format currency, which is kind of cool. At least we don't have to do that. This is where I'm going to cheat. So I'm going to move ahead a little bit to some of the example code, and this is where I'm going to just bring it in a little piece at a time on how I would develop this. So right now I'm thinking, well, I've got to do something with those objects, with those elements on the screen, and how do I go about doing that? Well, we need a variable that represents them. Well, how do we get a variable that represents them? We can use a get element by, document.getElement by. And in this case, we're going to use one. Instead of document.getElement by ID or whatever, we're going to do it by class name. Because if we look here, we have a class where each of these guys is named menu item. We could individually grab a hold of each of them with item 3 by ID, but no, we're worrying about arrays. So let's grab all of them in one array that'll allow us to work with it. So that's going to be my first step, is getting that and then verifying that it actually gets those elements. That's key. And that's what I'm going to be showing you in the debugger. Okay, so here's my cheating. I'm going to cheat. Here it is already, but this is first line here is exactly the step that I was talking to you about. Get elements by class name. Okay, and then I'm going to show you how to test this. Okay, so that is let menu items, or you could just say var. You could just say var, it doesn't matter. Var menu items, let menu items, whatever. But this right here, get elements by class name, that is going to allow us to access all those menu items with this particular variable. Then we need to go through, and for each of those menu items, we need to assign it to an event handler. And the event handler we're going to assign it is the change. Whenever the check is changed, it might be the click or the on change or the change, whichever one the checkbox works well with. But it's just an event that we're going to add to it. And that I'm going to cheat with also. That's our second step. That is actually modifying things. Now this is where I would stop, because I don't want to be stupid and write any more code without the most important reason for my whole code to exist, which is getting the elements that I want to modify for when the browser renders the HTML page, or right before it renders the HTML page. So the event listener that we need is called the click event listener. And you notice that none of this is in a function. This is all straight up inside of the code file, so it's guaranteed to run. This is a function that you have to call. So we're going to actually create a function called calcTotal, and that is what's going to do the actual calculations for us. But what I want to do is I want to just put this in the debugger, and I want to just show you how to debug in NetBeans and verify that yes, this worked. We actually got our menu items to start messing with. And for that, we're gonna hit play, and we're gonna go to the browser. Now this is the browser, and you're probably gonna want to set some breakpoints, and then you're gonna have to refresh it to get it to rerun, and then that's when your breakpoints will be invoked. So I'm gonna go here to Developer Tools, More Tools, Developer Tools, and I need to make sure that I select runtime for my breakpoint. And the runtime that we're working with is, why did my, oh, do you notice there that all of a sudden in the browser it doesn't have the JS file? That's because I forgot to include it again from the index. So it's not showing up in the browser because it's not being included. So the browser has no knowledge about our JavaScript code yet. So we got to go in and we need to include that in our HTML file. We got to put it down here in the body. So well, let's see, did I already do it over here? I don't want to go and copy the code or find the code. Where are you? Yeah, HTML. Ah, there he is. Let's just grab that. Okay, so I need to include it. Now let's go back to the one that we're working on, chapter 3, and then index. Now this is the code file that we're working on, and you notice that it doesn't have the JS file being loaded. So I'm going to put that in there, and I need to make sure, is this the right JS file? 3-01_text.js. Okay, so now the browser is going to be able to see it because we're loading it up. So we're going to go back to the browser, and I want to restart this, so I'm going to reload or hit F5. And then you're going to see it pop up in here because I've now included it, and the browser can now see it and is able to actually process that JS. Oh, there it is. Ha! Okay. So I didn't even have to hit refresh. It just it was close enough to where, okay, so that is the code that's going to run. And the code that's going to run is not inside of this right here. It's going to be code that is at file scope. You remember, when you create a function, you got to call the function. So this code is actually being run, and it looks like we got an error, but what I want to do is I want to just do a little bit of debugging here. Before we do that calcTotal, I want to make sure that menu items is actually working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint there. Yeah. Add breakpoint. Right click and add breakpoint. Okay. So I did a right click and I said add breakpoint. Okay, now the thing is you added the breakpoint, but you've got to have the website still got to reload again to rerun the script. So we're going to hit refresh, and then it's going to stop right where I put my breakpoint, and it's going to wait for me so that I can see if this happened or not. And I'm going to be using the step over. This is continue. This is step over. This is step into. I'm going to use this step over to process this line, and then I'm going to add a watch, and I'm going to look at menu items to see if it actually works. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add the watch right now. I'm going to go over here to plus, and I'm going to say menu items. I want to see what's going on with menu items. I want to make sure that it's actually getting the information from the DOM. I want to make sure that it's getting the elements from the DOM. So right now it says over here menu items is not available. That's totally fine because this line of code hasn't run yet. Menu items hasn't been assigned. When we pause on a line of code, it pauses, but it doesn't run that line until you do a step over. And then when I do a step over, we're going to see that menu items is going to be full of something. That is, if our get elements by class name worked correctly and we didn't have some kind of weird error. So step over, and then I look at menu items, and right there it says it, HTML collection. That's your array of elements that we grabbed. Oh, isn't that cool? Look at this. We can even highlight over them, and look at how it falls up and down in the browser. That is so cool. See, that's why you want to debug in Chrome. Firefox is a tool. Don't mess with Firefox. But now, hey, I verified that yes, I've actually got these menu items working. This code should now work. Oh, but I don't have a calcTotal function. Well, from the magic of having everything already done for you, let's go ahead and grab that and get it in there. So that calcTotal, we need to instantiate, we need to define it. We do not want to put the calcTotal function down here because you cannot put anything that you're using after it. So the calcTotal function must be defined in a JS file that is already been included before this one, or you must define it above where you're using it. Everything's done and interpreted top down, left to right. So if you define what calcTotal is after you're trying to use it, like on line 28, you're going to get hosed. It's not going to work. So once we define what calcTotal is, and we add it as the event handler for this click event, that's when it's able to know what that calcTotal is because it's predefined before. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into this, and I'm going to grab our function calcTotal. And then we're going to talk about it. Okay, back to where we were working on, and I'm going to put our calcTotal above. You know, I bet you somebody will probably try to do it below just to see if I'm lying or not. And guess what? I probably could be lying because every now and then you get updates in software where they'll allow more than one pass through so that you can actually use things that are defined after you use them. C# and Java work that way. I don't think JavaScript works that way yet. Okay, so here's the calcTotal function that is our event handler. Now, if we wanted to differentiate between which particular element was actually clicked on, we could do that through an event or an argument called E here. And if we passed an E in here, what would actually come in from the E is the actual element that we clicked on. So when you have an event argument for, when you have a function for handling events, the element that invoked the event will come to you as your event argument. So I could differentiate particularly which actual element was clicked on with the event argument. But we don't need that for this example. So we're going to just loop through the menu item's length. And if the menu item is checked, then we're going to go ahead and add up our order total. And our order total is something that we're going to use to show the, how much the order total. To show the order total. Yeah, well, guess what? Need more coffee. I think that's it. Bill total. This is it. This last little line here. So let's go back to the one that we're actually working on. This last little line goes in and it grabs the element by ID that represents our bill total. So if we look at our HTML, our bill total is this guy right here. It's showing up. So we can assign that to a different value, and it's going to output something other than 0. So we probably should do something like this. Bill total. No, it'll do it for us. So we assign it to 0, and it'll change the value inside for us. That's what the JavaScript does. That's what line 23 does. So we should be able to get this to work. I'm going to go ahead and hit save all. Then I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to reload. I'm going to reload by hitting F5. Okay, there's my reload. And now I'm going to want to look at maybe I can now look and set a breakpoint here to see how this is working. I'm going to hit continue. I'm going to go ahead and reload. Now I've set my breakpoint here, but here's a key thing that you want to know about this is since this function calcTotal is only being called when we click on a menu item because of our add event listener here, the only time this breakpoint is going to be stopped at is when we click on something over here. So let me click on that, and there's our breakpoint. And we can do a step over and examine everything that's going on here. Add watches, all that stuff we can look at. Because you must be able to debug with JavaScript. You don't have a choice. Because JavaScript allows you to write crappy code. I want to use some stronger other words for that. But literally, and there's a reason for that, is because we don't want the web breaking down over every little stupid simple thing. There are things and technologies that we need to make straight up bulletproof. If you've got an error, most likely JavaScript will happily ignore it and move along. But there are some errors that will just totally blow the instance of the interpreter out and crash the C++ code that's going on behind the scenes. It does happen. And that's where you need to get really good at setting breakpoints and looking at your code, looking at the variables you're working with, and verifying that everything works before you write more unworking code. Okay. So remember, debugging is everything. Always debug. And debugging is everything. It's my soapbox every quarter. So work with it, play with it. Your ability to learn and retain this material and understand what's going on amongst all this gobbledygook is going to be assured as long as you can see and view the mechanics going on behind the scenes. Okay, guys. I believe I'm going to go ahead and hit continue here and see if we got an order total. And sure enough, we do have an order total. So we're working well. Until next time, work on those debugging skills. Thank you. Bye. If I can find the stop button.